So when the weather starts to get cold and I can get my hand on some short ribs, my favorite thing to make is short rib ragu. There's just something so comforting about it. It's just that kind of food that warms you to your core. Pair it with like a nice dinner roll or some crusty sourdough bread, maybe a salad. It's amazing. In order to cook short rib really well and get that fall apart texture, it needs to cook for a long time. So today we're going to be braising it. We're going to pop it in the oven and it's going to slow cook for a couple of hours. So let's go ahead and jump right to it. Get your oven preheating to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. You will need a large, heavy bottomed pot for this recipe. Cast iron is great. One thing to note is if you're using a cast iron, it needs to be enameled. So not just plain black cast iron. If you use just like a black cast iron, what happens is the acidity from the tomatoes can react with that and give you a metallic taste. So stick with enameled, heavy bottomed pot. Try to link to this one, but this exact color I think has been discontinued, so I'll find something similar. Let's start with our short ribs. You are going to need 3 to 4 pounds of short ribs for this recipe. I've got 3.5 here, so right in the middle. And we are going to generously salt and pepper these before we begin anything. This is going to give us a really nice base flavor. So I usually start with like 2.5 teaspoons of kosher salt, and I'll just sprinkle that over the meat on all sides, and some freshly cracked black pepper. I don't know, I'd say I probably end up using like a half teaspoon of black pepper for the meat. Let's go ahead and turn it around. And you'll lose some of that salt while you're sprinkling it, no big deal. This is one of my favorite short rib dishes, but it's not my husband's. I make him this like really good sandwich, grilled cheese. Let me know if you want me to share that. That would probably just be a YouTube special. I don't know if I'd put that one on the blog. It's like a whole day process to make him a grilled cheese, but it's so good. I think we're in pretty good shape. As we turn it, it gets covered too. All right, let's make a little space here. Bring over our pot. Ooh, almost lost a short rib. All right, let's get this heat turned to like medium high. You want a nice hot heat in order to sear your meat properly. A good sear makes all the difference in the world. You want to get that nice golden brown exterior. So while this is warming up, I'll add a tablespoon of a cooking oil, olive oil, avocado oil, just your favorite oil. Just gonna swirl it around a bit. You don't need much because the short ribs are super greasy, very fatty, so they're going to render a lot of that pretty quickly, but a little bit of oil helps get that started. So let's let this get warmed up till it's shimmering and nice and hot, because once you place that short rib in the pan, you want to hear that sizzle. That's really important. That sizzle means flavor. Now, all of your short ribs won't fit in the pan at once. I mean, technically they could, but that would be a terrible idea. You never want to overcrowd your meat when you're cooking, because then what's going to happen is you're not going to get a nice sear. You're going to steam the meat. It's going to be gray, and then you lose all of that flavor. So I do this in batches. I'm just going to do like 4 ribs at a time. Now, if I'm in a super big hurry, I might only sear this on like 4 sides, but for the best flavor, you want to sear the meat on every side. That's what's going to really help build the flavor. Keep saying flavor, but flavor is important to me. It usually takes 2 to 3 minutes per side to sear if you have your heat at the right temperature. So the whole process takes a little bit of time, but it's worth the time that it takes. It's not that bad. I'll usually even set myself a timer because I'll like want to get impatient and peek that it's like a nice golden color, and that'll mess up your sear too. So have a little patience. Things can get a little smoky. You should have your fan vent on when you're doing this. Take a look. You got a nice golden sear there. We'll flip it. Once you're seared on all sides, grab yourself a plate. We're going to remove the meat to a plate. Now, batch number 2. Look, it takes a little time, but it's worth it. It is so smoky in here right now. The things I do to get these videos for you guys. Can't have a fan on when we're recording. Second batch of meat usually does cook a bit faster, just because your pan's really nice and hot. This is going to a plate. Okay, I'm going to drop my heat down to like medium. So as I mentioned, short ribs are super fatty. They render a lot of that while you're cooking them. Sometimes I end up with a lot of grease. If I have more than like 3 tablespoons of grease, I'll usually drain that off. We need some for cooking our veggies, very important, but these are just going to render even more as they're braising. So I like to keep it lighter. Otherwise, it's just too greasy. I'm just gonna take some out for now. Don't pour it down your drain, please. You never wanna pour grease down your drain. Just pour it in like a disposable container and let it solidify and then toss it out. Okay, so our stovetop's on medium. Next, we're going to add a cup of diced yellow onion. This is usually like 1 medium onion. And I also add some carrot. This is like 3/4 cup of chopped carrot. It's like 1 to 2 carrots, just depends on the size of your carrots. And we're just going to stir these frequently until both the carrots and onion are nicely softened. It takes about 5 minutes or so. Now, if you wanted, you could also chop up a celery rib and drop that in there too. I actually prefer this recipe without it, but it's a subtle difference, so Got celery you want to use, just toss it in. I always recommend having all of your ingredients prepped and ready to go before you begin. And just a reminder, I always have the full recipe listed in the description of the video, and I provide a link to the printable recipe on my website because it's my main hub. It's where I host all my recipes. And if you're watching this for my membership, you get access early, like before the blog even gets it, so the printable link won't be there until this goes out to everyone because you are getting really early access. All right, once those are nice and softened, let's move on to our garlic. I do 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. Mince your own garlic, don't buy that stuff in a jar. Put all of that in there. And we're just going to cook the garlic until it's nice and fragrant. Stir it, get it moving around. You don't want to burn your garlic. You can't really come back from that. But after like 30 seconds, it'll be nice and fragrant. Ooh, smelling good in here, so let's add our tomato paste. This is 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. We are going to add it right in. I like to make a little space and add it. That way it can get some direct contact with the pan for a second before I start stirring it. We're going to caramelize this. I also add my sugar here. Sugar can be a controversial added ingredient when it comes to tomato sauces. Feel free to adjust this depending on how your tomatoes are. Like if you have some that aren't really acidic, but using canned tomatoes, sometimes they're a little acidic. Sugar really helps. I usually add a tablespoon of sugar and it does not make the dish sweet. It just really helps with the flavor. So that's how I do it and how I recommend it. Any of you sugar naysayers, please proceed as you'd like. Just don't get mad at me if you don't have all the same flavor I do. All right, I stir both of these in and I'm just going to cook them until the tomato paste is a little deepened in color. This is just really helping to bring out its flavor, and again, I'm all about flavor, right? That's what we're trying to build on, is just really build a very flavorful base. And I would hope anybody sharing recipes online is all about flavor. I like to keep things moving a bit. Okay, so after like 60 seconds, things are a little bit darkened. Let's talk about our wine. You're going to need a ½ cup of a dry red wine for this recipe. If you don't use wine, swap this for additional beef broth, another ½ cup of beef broth. You'll follow the recipe as stated, but for those of you who don't mind, red wine really does add a great flavor. Who thought I was gonna say that? So we're also going to use this to deglaze the pan. My pan is actually pretty clean on the bottom. My onions worked up everything, but a lot of times you'll have like a brown layer on the bottom. The red wine is going to help bubble that up and mix it into the dish. So it doesn't stay on the bottom, it gets worked into the veggies and the sauce. That's very important for flavor. So I'm going to drizzle this in. It's going to get a little steamy and loud. And I do it slowly. I'm just doing like a little bit at a time. 2 tablespoons at a time, something like that. Not rocket science, just a bit. And I'm scraping the bottom of the pan. But again, not super necessary with mine. I got it up with the onion, but you want any brown bits worked into your dish. And I said a dry red wine. I personally am using Cabernet today. It's like a bold, dry red wine. At least that's what the label says. I'm not a wine drinker, but I like it in my dishes. Last bit, and then with the red wine, after we've added it in and deglazed our pan, we're just going to cook it, stirring frequently until, like if you smell the steam, it shouldn't really smell super acidic. It should have a more mellow scent. I know it's not super specific, but I also like to see that the wine's reduced by about half. It can be kind of tough to tell because it's mixed in with the veggies, but it's not very liquidy. You have a nice silky, velvety looking sauce here. You see that? It's like all the veggies are coated with this nice gloss. It's very pretty. All right, tomatoes, we were talking a bit about that with the sugar. We're going to add 28 ounces of whole peeled tomatoes. You can like crush them with your hand before you add them. I always add them and then just crush them in the pot. Try not to splatter myself here. Crushed tomatoes could work in a pinch, but like if you can get your hands on some good whole peeled tomatoes, that's going to work best. And as I'm adding them, I'm just kind of squishing them a bit. We'll keep breaking those up, but let's add our spices as well. I like to add these here. I have 2 teaspoons of dried basil. I'm gonna drop that in. I do a ½ teaspoon of dried oregano, a teaspoon of table salt, or like a finely ground sea salt would work well too. 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. I'm using fresh thyme today, so I'm going to wait a minute to add that. If you didn't have fresh thyme, I would just use a teaspoon of dried thyme. I think that's all my spices for now. Let's mix that in. Crushing our tomatoes. No large pieces remaining. And this like slow cooks for a couple hours. Your whole house smells amazing. It's like a great Sunday dinner on like a winter Sunday. So everything's nicely mixed in here. We'll add our broth. I do 2 cups of beef broth. Drizzle that in. All right, now I'll add my bay leaves, 2 dried bay leaves. Go right in there, get them submerged. And then our thyme. I will use like, I don't know, 8 or 10 sprigs of it. Thyme can be kind of funny to measure. They're all crazy. Sorry, bear with me here. Sometimes you people will tie them together. That way it's easier to fish them out, but evidently I like a challenge. So I have like one little bunch of thyme, drop the thyme in. And this is a bonus, but if you have like an extra Parmesan rind lying around, like we save our Parmesan rinds once we get to the bottom and we freeze them. So I always have extras of these. You can drop that in the pot as well. That really helps build the flavor too. It'll still be good if you don't have one, but I really love that extra addition. And now our beef. We're going to go ahead and drop these ribs back in the pot, nestle them in there nicely. It's better if they're submerged, but it's okay if they're not. This little guy, just drop him right in there. See you later, buddy. Okay, any juices, put those in the pan. Cover this with a lid, and we're going to take this over to our 325 Fahrenheit preheated oven where it's going to cook for, mine usually needs 3 hours, but I always check it at 2.5 hours. Short rib like this needs to cook a long time because those connective tissues in this meat are really tough. As they're cooking in the oven, slow cooking, they are going to break down and they're going to give you that incredibly flavorful dish. You'll know it's done because it's going to be super tender. You'll take a pair of forks and the meat should just fall apart as you're trying to shred it. This has been 3 hours. Oh yeah. So there's a lot of fat on the short ribs. There's bones and things, so I don't shred it in the pot. I remove it with like a cutting board or a plate. See, we'll only work with a couple ribs at a time. We'll shred them over here. Now, I like to serve this with pasta. Pappardelle, these like really broad noodles are my preference, but you can really use any pasta you'd like. So I get the water boiling while I'm shredding this. Don't forget to salt it really well, and then we will cook the pasta till it's al dente. This is 12 ounces of pappardelle. Stir it occasionally so it doesn't stick. I always reserve a cup of pasta water because we're going to need that. Well, then you can drain your pasta. Let's shred this meat, and it just shreds so nicely and easily. Beautiful. While you're shredding it, you're going to discard the bones, obviously, or you can save them to make like a bone broth. That's fine. Sometimes I do that. See, the bone should just fall out. But you should also come across a lot, you will also come across a lot of like gelatinous fat. Discard that. You don't need that in there anymore. We've got all the flavor from it. We're done with it. You're also going to come across this like connective layer. I'll show you in a moment. You see this? This is technically edible, but we're not going to eat it because it's not a very pleasant texture. At least I'm not going to eat it. So I always remove the meat from that. We'll discard that as well. Just not very pleasant in my opinion. Let's see, we've got fat we're removing. Smells so good. Dogs usually come running at this part. They're upstairs right now. There is lots of good meat mixed in here. You just kind of have to dig through the fat. Okay, we've separated out all of our meat. One thing I like to do that you don't have to is I like to kind of skim a little bit of the grease off the top. So this has been sitting off the heat while I've been shredding my meat, and you can kind of see there's like a little bit of a grease layer here. You see that? The oil separates. Just ladle that out. You just want to get that really top layer of oil. Now, if you're eating the ragu the next day, it's really easy to remove the excess oil because it'll all like float to the top and solidify, and you can just remove it. But I like to make this the same day I plan to eat it. The leftovers do amazing. Again, don't put any of that down your sink. The fat, not good for your sink system. You don't have to get all of it, this just helps. You don't have to do this at all, but I don't like mine to be too greasy. Another thing we're going to do is we are going to find any remnants of your Parmesan rind. You can discard them if they haven't completely disintegrated. Sometimes that happens. We're also going to remove our thyme leaves. Don't need those. And the bay leaves. Can't forget that time someone told me I was extremely irresponsible because I forgot to remove the bay leaves and somebody could choke and no longer be alive because of that. Bay leaf 1, bay leaf 2. Whew. All right, another thing I do, totally not necessary, but there's carrots in here and I want my kids to eat them, so I'll take a potato masher and kind of mash the sauce a bit just to break up those carrots and make the sauce a little bit smoother. Again, that's not mandatory, but it works really well for my kids. And the carrots are so tender, they should basically be like falling apart. This won't make it completely smooth, it just makes it a bit smoother. All right, your pasta should be finishing just about any minute. Before you drain it, make sure you reserve a nice bit of pasta water. So I always reserve like a cup. Careful, it's hot. Usually I do not need all of that, but I'd rather have more than not enough. The pasta's finished, we've drained it. Add it in just a second, but first I'm going to add my meat back into the pot. Just the meat, not all the bones and things. Bring back our spoon, mix that in. Let's add in our pasta. And I'm just going to add like 1/4 cup-ish of the pasta water. Mix everything up. Now my stove is behind me, but normally right after I add the meat back in, I turn my stovetop heat to to a simmer, and I'm going to simmer everything together. That's going to really help the sauce coat the noodles nicely, make you a really nice dish. So let's go ahead and pop this on the stove top. All right, once that sauce is clinging nicely to the noodles, it's a pretty translucent sauce, so it's not going to be like, the noodles won't be all red, but things should be clinging. Normally, I would leave this on the stove top, but for the sake of giving you guys an up close and personal, I'll bring it back over here. Always taste test your sauce. If it tastes anything but amazing, it probably just needs a pinch more salt or a little bit more salt. Please don't be afraid to add more salt because the exact amount of salt will vary depending on the broth you use, exactly how much you salt your meat, so many things. And this pasta water, I'll add a splash if things seem to be drying out a bit, and I will also save this for when I reheat this the next day. All right, let's go ahead and plate this. It's beautiful. I'm trying to plate this prettily. It's tricky, it's a little bit messy. All right, of course we need some Parmesan cheese on top, a little bit of parsley, just for color. It's really the only reason to add parsley, it looks nice. And that is how you make my favorite short rib ragu. I would love any feedback you have, I really do always love hearing from you, and I hope you love this one. Oh, let's see if I can not make a mess on camera. This might be more stressful than slicing cake. There's a proper way to do this, and this is not it. That is so, so good. This is one of my favorite short rub dishes. This is one of my favorite short rub dishes. No. A stink bug. Why would I call them short rubs? I turned my stovetop off. Give me a second. That makes sense. If you really think about this, this is a pretty gruesome task. Oh, that's so hot.